Good evening. I'm going to call this special City Council meeting and Sports and Open Space Authority meeting to order. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our statement of values? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Roll call. Assistant City Clerk.
Vice Mayor Mahan. Here. Councilmember Hardy.
Present.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember Davis. Councilmember Watanabe.
Here.
Councilmember Shahal.
Here.
Mayor Gilmore.
Here.
Thank you.
Motion to excuse Councilmember Davis.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion?
Who was the second, Raj?
Councilmember Chahal seconded the motion. Please register your vote.
In for you.
That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Mayor, may I read the statement
Yes,
of behavioral
please.
standards? The City of Santa Clara has adopted a code of ethics and values and behavioral standards for public meetings to promote and maintain the highest levels of conduct. This includes mutual respect, robust discussion, and allowing city business to be done in an efficient and consistent manner. Please note that as a presiding officer, the mayor's direction in matters of process and decorum should be followed, and that use of the gavel indicates all conversations must conclude, and everyone in attendance should come to order and attention. Welcome and thank you for your participation.
Thank you for that, Assistant City Clerk. We're going to go into our first item, which is discussion and review of user fees for cost of services, Phase 2. Director of Finance?
Thank you,
Yes.
Honorable Mayor, City Council. Ken Lee, Director of Finance. I'm joined at the table by Andrew Crabtree, Director of Community Development, and Manuel Pineda, Assistant City Manager. And behind me also is a representative from our consultant, Matrix Consulting Group, Courtney Ramos. And so the item before you includes a handful of slides and a report that accompanied this item, about a 120-page report. A lot of information, so the slides presented before you is intended to summarize a lot of that information and go over the user fee studies for Phase 2. As part of the presentation, we'll take a look at the timeline of the user fee studies. As some of you may recall, we started this study in May and broke it up into 3 phases, so we'll go through the timeline. A quick overview of the study, the methodology that was used to perform the study and develop some of the fees. We will get into the program areas for the individual development user fees and non-development fire fees. We have 4 sample projects to describe the impact of the fees and a summary of the outreach that was performed. From a timeline perspective, the City Council reviewed Phase 1 of the fees on May 21st and adopted those fees on July 16th. Staff, along with Matrix Consulting, met and had many, many meetings to get to where we are today. September 24th and September 30th, we had outreach meetings here in this chambers. It was well attended. We had some very good feedback. We brought the community room rentals portion of the fee study to the Parks and Recreation Committee and the Board of Library Trustees on October 15th. We did receive some feedback from those meetings, and we will bring forward that item separately at a later date. Which brings us to today, which is a study session of phase 2 of the user fee study. And then based on your feedback here today and direction, we will bring forward the adoption of the municipal fee schedule on November 19th next month. The phase 3 was also included in the study. We are proposing, based on a further analysis of those individual fees, that those would be brought forward separately under specific fee work plans. And as I mentioned earlier, community room rentals. Right now, we're targeting the December 17th meeting, but we will provide more information once we have that timeline. From a user fee study background, just a finance perspective, a lot of the revenues in the city are generated primarily through tax revenues or user fees. And so this study provides a tool to understand what are our current service levels, what are the demands of the city, what are those costs, and what fees can or should be charged for those services. So this provides that framework. From a legal perspective, we are bound that our fees may not exceed the estimated reasonable cost of providing the service for which the fee is charged. So basically saying we can't make money on the fees, and legally, the person paying the fee or the user paying the fee has to receive a direct benefit for that service. The study included a full cost review of staff and overhead costs associated with the fees. It informed levels of service where during interviews with departments we may be experiencing higher or longer cycle times than we want. So it informed activity levels and service delivery levels, incorporated new fees and services, and streamlined our fee schedules to eliminate outdated fees or ranges. From a methodology standpoint, the study took a bottom-up approach, which employed where time was spent per unit of fee activity. So this was not a time and motion study or time and material study, but a bottom-up approach that evaluated time per activity. This is a widely accepted and defensible approach. It looked at fully burdened rates for staff and for each positions, the time estimates used to provide the service, and analyze gaps between cost and revenues per program, and I'll detail that later on in the presentation. From a time estimate perspective, the consultant interviewed every department and for each of the fees evaluated the amount of time it took to process each service and each step. So this diagram here shows an example of a permit fee and walking through the process from intake and processing, routing, engineering review, and issuing the permit, calculating who does each function, what's the time involved, based on the service level desired. Then after the time is determined, it looked at salary cost and benefit costs, overhead costs, all the cost components behind each fee, and included an overhead calculation based on the latest study that was recently done, also by Matrix. Now this next section gets into the individual program areas for the fees. And so phase 2 consisted of primarily development user fees, and in the fire arena are non-development and hazardous materials fees. And the second column there for each of those areas shows the typical cost recovery percentage for local jurisdictions based on an analysis and review across cities. This third column there represents where are we at today? What's the cost recovery percentage that our current programs are experiencing? And they're typically in the planning area. 40% you'll see there is designed by policy just to encourage plan review and based on what the market can bear. And then the last column there, proposed cost recovery percentages that based on the study and an evaluation of an approach to achieve higher cost recovery percentages, some of the levels that we're proposing to bring those fees at. From a dollars perspective, you may recall in May we brought forward the study, and it detailed about $20 million in subsidies across all the programs and all the funds The portion of Phase 2 that evaluated the programs there totals about a $9.1 million subsidy. Just want to clarify, that's not all in the general fund. And with that further analysis, the total subsidy citywide across all user fees is approximately $22.4 million. So we're hoping to, with this study and with the approval of the fees, to close that gap. From an individual program perspective, the planning area current cost recovery is at 40%, and that annual subsidy is $1.8 million. We are proposing to move to about a 45% cost recovery, and some of those subsidies are primarily in the single-family home area, and so we're proposing to increase those rates by 5%. And one example there, the architectural review. The current fee is $787. Cost recovery was determined to be a little over $10,000, and our recommendation here is to increase it slightly to $837. The other examples on this slide around larger developments, planned development rezoning fee is proposed to increase, and non-single family larger developments also to increase to achieve 100% cost recovery. For use permits, these are highly subsidized, and when the consultant looked at that and compared that to neighboring cities, it was above the average, so no increases are proposed here. And these, some examples of these are either small business or live entertainment type permits that are used, and so our current fee is it's just shy of $10,000 there, less than half a cost recovery. And so we're proposing to increase that specific fee to $12,000. On an overall basis, in the planning area, the proposed modifications include a reorganization of fees to better reflect services provided, and then in the general plan amendment area to expand the categories from 1 acre, it previously was 1 acre or over 1 acre, to 4 categories, as you see there. After a review in the building area, the consultant determined that there was no city subsidy being provided. They were cost recovery. However, how those fees were distributed between large projects and smaller projects, and taking a look at a more equitable way of charging these fees, some changes are proposed. Overall, these fees have not been looked at for over 15 years. They currently are valuation-based, so there has been some increase as property values have changed, but on an overall basis, we have not looked at these fees for over 15 years. Key summary here, decrease in fees for higher valued projects, so larger developments, and an increase in fees for lower valued projects. And then from a methodology standpoint, switching to a square footage based and not a valuation based. We're hoping that that approach would be more straightforward and easier to project as far as what fees would be charged on a development. In the fire program, it currently recovers 81% of cost recovery, or about $1.5 million subsidy, primarily in 2 areas. In the development areas around inspection and plan review, about $300,000, and then the rest of the subsidy is attributable to what we call the CUPA program, or a County Hazardous Materials Program. So these are fees charged to your gas stations, your auto repair shops, any facility that has hazardous materials. It's a requirement by the county to inspect and ensure that safety, from a safety perspective, or our fire inspection team goes out and does a check on those facilities. Proposed modifications is to achieve 85% cost recovery, and then for CUPA fees to reach 100% over 4 years. So based on the size of those increase and the sensitivity around the customers that would be impacted, we are proposing a 4-year phase-in for those fees. On this slide, I won't go through every one of those, but it gives you an example of the types of fees: the overtime, plan review and inspection, hazmat, fire protection system. So based on sprinklers, the change in the fees is expected to increase there over 4 years. And then inspection in some of the larger multifamily buildings, we're reducing those fees per unit. For public works, development-related fees are primarily in the engineering area. Those fees were recently updated in 2016 and are currently at 78% cost recovery. We are looking to add new fees around the entitlement area and proposing to achieve 97% cost recovery for the program. Streets fees in the Public Works Department are primarily fees charged to other city departments for related work for water and sewer projects or SVP projects. Some of the new fees around zoning and application fees, tentative map review and CEQA review, and changes to engineering plans are listed there, and other methodology changes. In the water and sewer program areas, I want to clarify, these are not fees related to what customers pay for their usage or retail rates. These are development-related fees, currently achieving 67% in water and 55% cost recovery. And the goal here is really to move closer towards 100% cost recovery to protect our ratepayers from future increases. And so it allocates fees charged to developers and development. Some of these fees are market-driven, so those tied to your sewer laterals or your water mains. So those fees that are competing with the market are under cost recovery, but for the bulk of the fees, here are some of the examples: engineering plan check review, engineering inspection, and field marking were proposed to increase closer to that 100% cost recovery. Some of the fees decreasing there based on an analysis of tapping into the water supply are proposed to decrease significantly there from 2,400 to 737, and then for those 3 inches or larger, 3,700 to 862. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to Andrew Crabtree, who will walk through 4 example projects and their specific impacts and a comparison with other jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. So it was important to us to understand how these proposed fee changes would affect the cost overall when you add them together for a project, and also how that would then have us compare with other neighboring jurisdictions. So we picked 4 example projects, kind of represent a variety of small and large project types, some that might be ones that single-family homeowners, accessory dwelling unit would be something a single-family homeowner would likely experience, a small office commercial project, tenant improvement office project of 20,000 square feet, a larger commercial project, an office building here, 5 stories, about 275,000 square feet, and then a mixed-use, primarily residential, but with a commercial component project. And we developed those 4 examples and ran them through the proposed fees to see what that would result in. So these bar charts present the analysis. If you kind of look across the bar chart from left to right, the first column represents our current fee level, and that's broken into different components. The gray color represents the building permit fee portion of it. The blue color represents fire. Were there a planning fee associated, for example, in this example, it would be red. And then public works engineering is the light blue aqua sort of color. The bar across represents the average across all the different jurisdictions. And then you can see moving from left to right, the next column is our proposed fee level. Then we have Palo Alto, Milpitas, San Jose, Cupertino, and Sunnyvale for comparison. So in the case of the first example, which is an accessory dwelling unit, 500 square foot, a pretty small project, our current fees would be in total about $3,000. That would move to a little bit over $4,000, but we would still be below the average and in keeping with our neighboring cities. And just also reiterate too that we're in this case, we don't have a planning component. Some other cities might charge for planning review. That's something we provide if necessary without any fees. There are other things that we provide service-wise that aren't captured, aren't reflected here because they aren't charged to the applicant. The next example is the office tenant improvement project. Again, a small project. Our current fee for this would be about $25,000. That moves to a little bit over $30,000. But we're still would be significantly below the average when we look at neighboring jurisdictions. And again, our process doesn't require planning review, so it's not reflected. I'd also note that in some cases, some of the other cities, this represents their initial fee, and then they will charge additional fees as they go through the process, if the time that they take to review something runs over certain thresholds. But we don't have that model. We're trying to stay with our simpler approach. Looking at a larger project, this is a 5-story office building. And here you see the effect with the building permit fee change, that the fees are going down. Our first column, we're at about $400,000 in fees today. Under the proposal, we would be a little bit over $300,000 in what we would charge for this project. Some of it goes up. The planning portion, for example, does go up, but the building permit fees as a result of the study are being reduced as we go to a more pure cost recovery model. And again, as we are a little bit above average, but with the proposed fee changes, we would be below the average. And then the final example is a mixed-use residential and commercial project. And again, as a larger project, the overall fee amount goes down, primarily as a result of the building permit fees being reduced in this case. And you can see that in this example, the fees go from about $1 million to about $800,000, and we're well below the average at that level. I also wanted to give you a summary of the outreach that we've done. We conducted 2 outreach meetings on September 24th and September 30th, and we sent out notices of those meetings to about 100 developer contacts that we have, and then over 1,000 people who are in the FIRE Coupa program. So recognizing that's a special group that has their own concerns, but we had representation from that group as well at the meetings. We had about 12 to 15 people at each meeting. We've also had some discussion about our fee changes with our applicants that we meet with in various venues, including some of our specific plan groups where we're often meeting with our applicants. So if they didn't necessarily attend one of our outreach meetings, but they've still been discussing, aware of our fee changes and discussing implications for their projects. So we were able to share the consultant's report ahead of the study session so that information is available. And then following the requirements for notification, the municipal fee schedule is going to be posted publicly 10 days prior to the November 19th City Council meeting. So with that, we're available along with our consultant to answer any questions you have and hear any feedback that you'd like to offer.
Okay, thank you both, all of you, for that very comprehensive report. We appreciate it. Councilmember Teresa O'Neill, you're first.
Thank you. So one of the things, on some of the slides where you did the case studies and you compared us to other cities, do you have a sense, are we a lot more efficient, or do we not have as many steps, or why on some of those examples there's, some of them they're pretty tight, but on some there's real marked differences. Do you have a sense for why there's such a difference between some of our neighboring cities and ourselves?
Well, part of it can relate to the hearing processes that we have codified. So, different cities have different hearing procedures, right? Whether something requires a public hearing, how many public hearings it requires, those are big cost drivers in the planning permit part of the process. Also, we are, in some cases, still continuing to provide some subsidy. I think in some of the other cities, there's more subsidy into the program. So example, like in this case, Cupertino, I suspect that there's a considerable amount of subsidy going into their fees, and that's why I don't think that they're much more efficient than us. I think that's a result of subsidy and the difference there. But you know, it may speak to some efficiencies that we do have as an organization. I think that was kind of beyond the scope of the study that we had with the consultant to really dig into what the other cities do. But I know that we're always looking for ways to be efficient in our own organization.
So my other question then is kind of a bit related to, one of the things in your presentation that kind of jumped out at me was the numbers that you cited for the new development architectural review and particularly a use permit, which could even be for a, you know, a little restaurant or something. So that the cost, so like when a new development architecture review, is that the same for, say, like related Santa Clara
That one,
as
yeah.
somebody's remodeling their house? I mean, you know, I was just kind of taken aback at the size of the numbers. And, you know, then like for the use permits also, because most of the time when we see use permits, like there's, you know, it's a restaurant that's wants to sell beer or wine or something, or, you know.
So really looking at the planning program, which is fairly significantly subsidized, as you saw in the earlier slide, we're currently at about 60% subsidy into the program. Most of that is focused on single-family related activities, and in the proposal, we would continue to that. So that's why you see that, you know, went from 40 to 45% overall. But the architectural review at the bottom there, the 787, that's for the single-family homeowner, versus you know, our cost to deliver the service being a little bit over $10,000, and then the proposal is $837. So it's a modest increase. We looked at like what other cities were charging, and we thought that was acceptable, but it's still the intent here to provide subsidy, as has been the sort of the city's history in that regard. The one that you see up above, the new development architectural review, non-single family residential, there is the non-SFR note, and that's really intended to go to 100% cost recovery. I would note that in some cases that's offset as we adopt specific plans. Plan development zoning, which is a fairly expensive process, you can see up above, would no longer be necessary. So there's a savings to our applicants that way. But we recognize that the current fee is quite low. What we're charging at $12,768 for that service, and it seems appropriate to really be charging full cost recovery on these types of commercial developments.
Yeah, I mean, so that didn't strike me as much as like the architectural review for a single-family home, that the cost recovery, that is costing us $10,000 to do that. It just seems.
And this is really related to, you know, projects that go to public hearing. And then you did mention the use permit, and that's another area where there's a significant subsidy currently and proposed to continue to be the case. And we recognize that these are often small businesses that are subject to this permit requirement. So that's sort of the rationale for having a subsidy.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I actually have questions about the use permit as well. And I'm glad that you just mentioned that they're like for usually like smaller restaurants, businesses, things like that. But I was wondering, like, for instance, at the stadium, when they have an event and they have to pull permits for different things that they might do. I mean, does that fall under this category as well, or is it something completely different?
So things that are actually happening on the stadium property are generally already permitted through the master's or stadium permit that was issued by the city several years ago. So most of those events, as long as they conform to the conditions in that permit, don't require any additional planning review.
Okay.
So they would not be going through a use permit process.
Okay. Well, my other question, again, because, with the differential and because the full cost recovery versus the recommended fee. Do any cities use an approach like where, like, using a sliding scale, depending on how big the business is or what they might be able to afford in an effort to maybe gather, more fees as a result?
Yeah, I would say that, that one of the things we always grapple with is how complicated for the fee schedule to be, and it's going to kind of create categories. One of the things that we're proposing in this round with general plan amendments was to create more categories so that there was, smaller projects maybe get charged less and bigger projects get charged more.
Right.
We don't have that proposed currently for use permits. It's sort of a one fee level, but that's input that you could provide if that's something you want us to look at. Should we break that down into multiple categories? That's something that could be done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members, questions? Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. Coming back to the 4 scenarios which we did, like ADU and 350 units. So looks like Cupertino is giving a lot of subsidy on that. Can we look at that, like ADUs are primarily on high priority right now as per state, as per the city. So can we reduce those fees to the level we can further go down?
Certainly, what the staff is proposing as part of that process is to get us closer to 100% cost recovery. If the council, as a policy direction, would like to subsidize, the general fund could provide subsidy towards those AD units. So that would be a policy choice. But when we look at it in the context of, $3,000, going from, say, $3,000 to $4,000, is not that significant an increase, but it does help us come closer to 100% cost recovery. A level of subsidy ultimately is a policy decision.
Okay. And my other question is on the user fee study, for example, project 3 5-story building and mixed use 350 units. Are those at 100%, whatever we are proposing, are they 100% cost recovery, or we have subsidy on those, both of those?
So for the examples number 3 and 4, the building permit is 100% cost recovery. The planning permit is also proposed to be 100% cost recovery. If you speak to fire.
For public works related fees, I think we're trying to achieve pretty close to 100% cost recovery. And I think for fire, over a phased approach, we're targeting 100% cost recovery as well.
Okay, so basically in both these examples, we are almost getting 100% in all the departments.
That is correct.
Okay, and one thing, the architectural review for a residential, I'm not sure how we are calculating that to be $10,000 as a cost. That seems to be a little bit higher side as we look at it. I'm not sure how did we calculate that, but it looks pretty high.
Yeah. Well, if you want to go into the methodology more, that might be a question for the consultant, but it really was based on us looking at the experience of processing these types of applications, breaking down how many hours are involved. So, the single family review fee that relates to the time it takes to get a project through the architectural review process that we have today.
Thank you.
We have to take a look at the architectural review process in itself. That's another story. All right. It's on a future agenda. Thanks for bringing that up. Vice Mayor Mahan.
What about zoning changes and fees for applying for a zoning change, especially like in the historic areas where you can change from a single-family dwelling to a historic combining district? I mean, it's a planned development, but it also includes often a zoning change.
So related to single-family homes, again, there's a pretty high subsidy. So if we're looking at something that's going through like a historical review process and being referred to the Historical and Landmarks Commission, for example, There's still a significant subsidy. The fee is around $400, and the actual cost is about $5,000. So there's about a 90% subsidy there. In terms of rezoning, let's see how we break that down. So the rezoning of a single-family lot, we do have a subsidy there as well. It's not at the same level, but there is some subsidy. So generally, there have been efforts made to try to reduce the cost to single-family homeowners, and that certainly applies to the historical process. So anyone, the permits that relate to a historical process, so anyone who's going through a historical review process is receiving subsidy from the city.
And then at one time, we were encouraging, especially in the Old Quad area, where a lot of the streets under the general plan were designated commercial, like Benton and the Alameda and Lafayette. And we were encouraging homeowners to come in and apply for rezoning from commercial to single family, and we weren't charging them anything. Is that program still around?
So it is possible for someone to petition the Planning Commission to initiate a rezoning on their behalf, and we had that happen, I know, once this year so far. So occasionally there are people that come through. I think about 10 or more years ago, we sent out letters sort of proactively encouraging people to come in and rezone. We haven't had a program like that since then, but it's still, there is still that opportunity for people to request that the city initiate the rezone for them.
And so then is there a fee attached to that, or is that?
No.
Okay, then so that's still in place. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other council questions or comments, so I'm going to turn it over to the public. The first card that I have here is from Dennis Martin, followed by Suds Jane. So you can please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Dennis Martin, speaking on behalf of the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area, BIA Bay Area, an association of home builders, both ownership and rental, and associated industries, and built developments here in Santa Clara. Will build. Our concern about fee increases, and we're here to make some points about the study and about the process that we think could be improved. The study, first of all, BIA has participated in other development fee services studies, including San Jose and Milpitas. Of course, Milpitas was, Matrix was the consultant there, and we think that those included some aspects that we'd like to see you work on here. First of all, we think that an accurate time motion study is important to determine an accurate time to task that many of these processes demand. This crucial element is missing here as estimates are being relied upon. And we'd like to see something put in that the council directs staff to go back, do at least some spot checking on time motion, and make sure that we're on track with the tasks. But the major point I think we want to make is that there are no service delivery improvements that are promised with these fee increases. And we think that that's a crucial part of what you should be asking for from staff. It is important for the city, I think, to have the confidence of the building industry, and builders are more likely to support increases in fees if they can be assured of better, faster, more efficient service. We'd ask for a companion service improvement study recommending revisions and improvements to planning and building permit processes, personnel training, development services, technology improvements, and other revisions that could provide measurable increase to service levels. Just even stating what the service level should be would be an improvement to the study as it stands. The city has enjoyed a reputation over the years for openness, responsiveness, and efficiency. Costs were always seen as moderate, and especially in comparison to other cities, service delivery was acceptable to very good in those parameters. Now, we're starting to hear that the city is not so good in delivering services. Complaints on time from application to permit issuance, complaints on high fee loads. We sure that these are temporary issues that just need to be ironed out in the city, but I think it's important that we bring that to your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Mr. Jane, and then anyone else that would like to speak, please come forward and queue up. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm disappointed that the discussion on community rooms was delayed simply because a number of people here are for that purpose. But I did go to the meetings, and I just want to put in my comments here so that as it comes back to you, hopefully some of these modifications will be put in there. I think that reducing the fees to 0 to free for priority 1 and priority 2 will lead to abuse. There should be a nominal fee, say $15 for rooms under 40 people, and then $35 for rooms larger than 40 people. And the numbers can change based on, usage of the rooms in the next municipal fee schedule. But it just leads to abuse. Whenever you give something out for free, people take more of it, they use more of it. So I don't think that's right. And then I wish there was an online calendar so I could see which rooms were available at what times in the various buildings without having to call the CRC or go over to the CRC. And then I think the city should start considering adding electronic locks to park buildings so that you don't have to make a special trip to the CRC to get the key, then have your meeting the next day, and then go back and return the key back to the room. So that's 3 trips. And then the Old Quad Residents Association often has meetings where we need a projector. And right now it costs $72 an hour to use the AV system at the library rooms. We think that that's excessive and should be maybe a small charge for using the wireless microphones that might get broken, but not for the AV system. And then I wanted to know if there was any charges being proposed for setting up and breaking down rooms. I would actually prefer that we set up the rooms and save the charge of having to have pay staff to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, and we received your email this morning with all those points, and I know we all have a copy of it. Thank you. Anyone else to come forward? Okay. Maybe we can ask the city staff about just the 2 things that were brought up. One, do we know when the community room discussion is going to take place?
We're going to bring that back as part of phase 3.
Oh, that's
later
phase.
this
So
year.
roughly, is that November?
December, late,
November, December?
Looking for a date. December 17th, 18 is saying.
Okay, so we want to make sure that that is advertised to the community. I know we go over all these fees, and those are the fees that really a lot of our community would like to talk about because it really affects a lot of people in the community. So we'll make sure that's well advertised. The next is the issue that Dennis Martin brought up about spot checking, a time motion study. What are we going to do about service delivery improvements? And I know a lot of these things we're going to be talking about in our goal setting session in terms of how we deliver services to the community, but I would be wondering if our staff has any comments about that, either of those things.
Sure, thank you. First off, I'd like to say that we're always looking for ways to improve our service delivery, whether that's in just customer service training or changing our procedures or having better tools available. As you know, we're working on upgrading our permit tracking system, and we think that will really help facilitate more coordination between the different departments that are involved in development review, and also making information more readily available to our customers and to the public. So we're looking forward to bringing that online next year. And then once that big effort, and that's a lot of work, is done, we'll be working at the next thing and what we can always do to continue to provide better service. So that's definitely a priority for our department. Related to this, as noted, this was really a question of how much subsidy should be into the program from the general fund or other sources. So as a result of these proposed fee changes, there would not be any increase in resources made available to the department. So it's not that, with whatever changes we implement here, we would then have more money flowing into the department to go try to, staff up or something like that. That's not the intent here. It's really just reviewing what we have, where we have subsidy and what makes sense to adjust that. As you also should have, noticed that overall, particularly for the larger projects, the fees are going down as a result of the proposed fees. And a lot of that relates to the fact that the building permits had not been studied since, I think, 1993. So they were based on valuation levels that the highest level was $1 million plus. In the new fee structure, we would have a $10 million plus category with a reduced rate at which we charge fees. So there's sort of that catching up with where the economy has gone in 20 years is resulting in a decrease in actual total fee levels for those bigger projects.
Well, I think that there's an expectation that if fees go up, that so does service delivery. And I know that we are, I think there's gaps in our departments in terms of to deal with the demand that's out there now. I mean, there's a huge demand for our services, especially in planning and building, public works and other areas. There's a huge demand, and we just, we don't have enough to meet it, but yet we're increasing the fees. So that's what I think we need to discuss as policymakers in terms of how we provide resources to the departments to meet the demands that are out there, because everything's cyclical. It's, up and down, and right now it just seems to still be going up, and the request for our services. So I think that's a big issues for us here in the city and providing the services, and to keep our stellar reputation that we have in providing great services to the community, in reasonable time.
I wanted to comment that many of the surrounding cities are much like Santa Clara in that we have been inundated with a lot of development and impacts in terms of customer service levels and our turnaround time. That's a very common trend within the public sector. I think one important benchmark, and both the mayor and community development director have said it well, is that we are always looking for ways to improve, and technology improvements and training. It's been the subject of our priority setting session. It is difficult when their volume of work is very high to do all concurrently. However, the issue before you today is the issues of cost to provide the service, and the study, what has yielded. If there's an interest in enhanced services, that's a different dialogue that we will need to have, and that we can certainly prepare for, that comes with a different set of fees as well as new approaches to service delivery. What's important is the charts that were put up there in terms of how we're benchmarking with our cost recovery and our cost proposal, because it shows that we're still very much within the realm of being moderate, and that we are identifying where areas are going down and up based on what the user fee study. I do want to ask staff who did not comment completely on the spot check. I think that's a great idea. I'm not certain that we do that already, but certainly open to doing that task.
Thank you. And no, I agree. Our fees have been moderate, but we do need to cost recover them, and there's no doubt about that. But I think that, handling the sheer amount of work that's coming in is challenging for us. It's just challenging. So we need to be aware of it and acknowledge it, and do whatever we can to make it better, especially with technology and training and all the things we need to do. So anyone else on the council? Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. This was a great report. We appreciate all the information. And it's nice to see some fees going down too, even though many are going up. So you don't hear that very often. So thank you very much. All right, that's a study session, so there's no action taken on that. All right, just give a couple minutes so they can move that out. Our next item is continuances and exceptions. Are there any continuances and exceptions from the council, the staff, or the public? Okay, seeing none. Kathy, is she's here? Okay. We're going to go into our first special order of business. So tonight, we are recognizing local author Stacy Heather Lee as a special order of business this evening. Stacy Heather Lee is a local award-winning author of historical and contemporary young adult fiction who resides in Rivermark of Santa Clara, which is in District 1, Councilmember Watanabe's district. And Councilmember Watanabe did bring us a special order of business this evening, so I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. It is indeed an honor to be able to recognize, it's always an honor to recognize the great citizens of Santa Clara, but especially when they're in District 1. So it's an honor to have Stacy here this evening and her husband Jonathan and their two beautiful children, Ava and Bennett. So it's very nice to see you tonight, and I'm really happy to see a couple of Rivermark residents are here as well to support their friend and neighbor. To start out, just so you know a little bit about Stacy, Stacy is actually a fourth-generation Chinese American growing up in California, and she graduated from UCLA and received her law degree from UC Davis School of Law. And after practicing law in Silicon Valley for several years, she pursued her childhood dream of becoming a writer. And I have to say, not many people are very fortunate to be able to leave a lucrative career to seek out their dream and become a writer, and a very successful writer at that. And so all the more reason we're here. We're happy to have Stacy here, and also as a resident of the city of Santa Clara. So just so you know, what did she write? Well, she's written quite a few books in a relatively short period of time. Stacy's first novel was Under a Painted Sky, which received the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Crystal Knight Award in 2016. And then she had a novel, Outrun the Moon, which received the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association Literature Award in Young Adult Literature, and the 2017 Penn Center USA Literacy Award for Young Adult Literature. And then she went on to write her latest novel, which is The Downstairs Girl, which was featured on the New York Times bestsellers list, which is a great accomplishment and achievement in itself, but also notably, The Downstairs Girl is currently number 16 on the Amazon bestsellers list in teen and young adult 19th century United States historical fiction. So, and in closing, Stacy is a founding member of We Need Diverse Books, which is a nonprofit organization that she is also the legal director of. And the wonderful part about creating this nonprofit is that it was created to promote diversity of multiple forms in children's literature and publishing. And their mission statement is putting more books featuring diverse characters into the hands of all children. And their vision is a world in which all children can see themselves in the pages of books, which I think is very, just great. So just in closing, thank you, Stacy, for allowing the city to honor you for your achievement, but more importantly, for expanding your vision to make sure that children and young adults have reading materials that are all-inclusive. We are all very proud of you. So in closing, I would just like to invite you, Stacy, to come forward up to the podium and hopefully, instead of writing, speak a few words to us and receive a proclamation from the mayor and the council to honor your wonderful achievement.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much. Council members, Mayor Gilmore, it's just wonderful to be here. Thanks for giving me a chance to come to City Hall meeting for the first time. Santa Clara, I thought I would just tell you a little about why Santa Clara has achieved such a place in my heart. It was really an accident that I came here. My parents are from the Bay Area, but I grew up and they raised me in Southern California. As Kathy mentioned, I came to Northern California because I went to law school up at UC Davis. I practiced law for a couple of years, but it was too hot in Sacramento. So I decided I was going to move back to LA and live with my parents for a while. The day I was set to move, I got a call from a company here in Milpitas, right on the corner of Montague and Barber Lane. It's called Creative Labs, and they said, Stacy, we really want you to come in for an interview. Do you think you can come in? So I decided I would make a little pit stop on the way back down to LA and talk with them. Stopped there and talked with them, went on my merry way, and the next day I got a call from them saying, we would like you to work with us. So I turned around, I didn't even unpack my car at that point, went back up the 5 freeway, and that's how I landed in the Bay Area. When my husband and I decided to get married, we chose the Triton Museum as the location, and that really opened my eyes to the beauty and the loveliness of Santa Clara. We ended up buying our first home 16 years ago in the Rivermark community, where we've lived ever since. I ended up retiring from practicing law to start a family, and it was then that I was really able to indulge something that I'd loved doing for all of my life, which is to write. I got a side gig at the Santa Clara Weekly, writing a column called The Dish, which nobody remembers. It's a food column where I reviewed local restaurants, and this was in the days before Yelp. And I still get sort of a thrill when I see my reviews posted in the windows of the restaurants that are still existing, some of them. So that was my side gig. But it wasn't until my kids were in their preschool years that I really had time for more than a side gig. My parents kindly allowed my kids to spend the summer with them in LA. And my husband and I decided to redo our floors so with the kids out of the house. And as anyone who has ever redone their floors knows, it's very noisy and very messy. So that displaced me to the Central Library where I had taken the kids every week. I decided to hang out at the Central Library and, have some peaceful time to myself. Libraries are one of my happy places, and I'm just going to pause here to say what magical places the libraries are. That's where all the ideas happen. That's where ideas are born, and they are really our last hopes against oppression and tyranny, in my opinion. So that's my little plug for the library. Any chance we can do to support them, I am all for that. So I found myself in the children's department in that section devoted to California history, which any of us who have ever had a fourth grader is probably familiar with. I picked up a book on the gold rush, and 6 months later, that story was Under a Painted Sky, which is my first book, as Kathy so nicely explained to you. Outrun the Moon was the second book, and that was about the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The third book was The Secret of a Heart Note. Actually, this was a contemporary book, and I based the setting there on Santa Clara. It's a fictionalized Bay Area town. And then The Downstairs Girl, which just came out a couple months ago. So living in the Bay Area, and specifically Santa Clara here, has definitely shaped and influenced all my books. And it might have been an accident that I came here, but it was a happy accident. And I'm just so honored to be honored by the city where all my books were born. So thank you very much.
Stacy, before you sit down, though, first of all, I think you made our city librarian, Hillary Keith, who's back there with some library trustees, and Justin also from Mission Library, very, very happy. So That was a great plug for our library system here. But we do want to congratulate you and recognize you for your many accomplishments and commend you for your work in promoting diversity in children's literature. And we all want to wish you the best for your future endeavors. And we want to present you with the City of Santa Clara Proclamation. And if you'd like to join us up here, and we'd be happy to have your family up as well to take some pictures as well. Thank you, Councilmember Watanabe, for honoring her. This is really, really great. Our next special order of business, I'm holding off. We're waiting for someone to come from the Rotary Club regarding World Polio Day, so we'll just hold off on that. So our next item of business is the consent calendar. All items are approved with one motion unless there's an item pulled for discussion. Councilmember Hardy?
I'd like to pull 2C, please.
2C, okay. Anybody else? Councilmember
2E.
Watanabe?
Yes, 2E, please.
2E?
2E.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone from the audience? Okay. Is there a motion for the balance of the consent calendar? Motion second. Any discussion? Audience? Okay. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item we have, I think, is public presentations. Do we have any public presentations? Would any member of the audience like to make a presentation on any item that's not on the agenda? Please come forward. Yes.
I'm going to actually have to talk about the polio thing because I have to leave for an appointment.
Okay.
So this issue is very personal to me. I contracted polio when I was 1.5 years old, which is why I walk with a limp. I served actually as the polio campaign manager for the Santa Clara Rotary for 3 years. So I know what the Rotary is doing about this. There are now only 2 countries left in the world that have wild cases of polio. That's Afghanistan and Pakistan, and they're actually going in the wrong direction. So in 2018, there were 28 wild polio cases. This year, there were 88, so 4 times more, 3 times more. And the good news is the continent of Africa has not had a wild polio case in 3 years, so it's now polio-free, which is very good news. So we were actually in India when I got polio. All of the people my age here in the United States had already been vaccinated, but the vaccine hadn't come to where we were living in India. So I missed out and I got polio and am suffering from it. So this is a big plug for everyone to get vaccinated. There is really no scientific data saying that vaccines will cause autism. So that is a total myth. Everyone needs to be vaccinated. There are people suffering horrible diseases because of not getting vaccinated. So this is a proclamation and a resolution, and I know the council is often shy about issuing resolutions and proclamations because they take up time. Another item that's near and dear to my heart is the issue of climate change. So I'm asking that at some point the council adopt what the Board of Supervisors has done in August 27th, is to declare immediate action to halt, reverse, restore, and address the consequences and causes of global warming. So they declared a climate emergency. The president of the University of California and all 10 chancellors also declared a climate emergency. So I'm urging that this council at some point declare a climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make a public presentation? Okay, seeing none, we're then going to move to consent items that were pulled for discussion. The first is item 2C, action on a multimodal improvement plan funding agreement with Related Santa Clara LLC for the Related Santa Clara project and related budget amendment. Councilmember Hardy, you pulled this item.
Yes. The first reason is if you go to the location map, this did not show up when I pointed this out to staff, but it shows a map of Santa Clara, but at the top it says City of San Carlos General Plan. I looked at that twice and made certain, is that?
Yeah, Craig Mobeck, Director of Public Works. I'm not sure why that is. When I looked in the Legistar, when we approved the report, it's not showing on the maps in Legistar on the computer, and it wasn't showing in the printout document. So I'm not sure what type of glitch that is. That why
Does yours show? 'Cause mine shows
That wasn't,
San Carlos.
there were two parts to this, so.
We need to find out, we think it's an iPad glitch because on the laptop, it's showing a different map and it's the correct map that should have been attached.
It's the correct map, it just has the heading is wrong. It says City of San
We have
Carlos.
an entirely different map on when we go from a laptop.
She's just talking about the heading on top. It says City of San Carlos General
That
Plan.
doesn't show. We'll look into
So
that.
we don't know why. It's probably a glitch from our iPad.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a City of Santa Clara map and it shows City Place.
It does.
Okay.
The other question, that wasn't the only reason to pull that. On page 3 of the report, it said pedestrian overcrossing study, and I wanted to know directly what that was as far as what pedestrian overcrossing we'd be studying.
Sure. So during the development of the multimodal improvement plan, there was discussions about a connection across Tasman. And so while during that time there was some specific discussion on where it should or shouldn't be included, we felt that the best option was to look at a study and go through a process to determine what is the best location for that type of connection, given all the amenities out there with the new project, as well as the convention center, the theme park, and Levi's Stadium as well.
Is there, I was hoping that's what it was. I've always wanted to know why we didn't build a pedestrian crossing over Tasman with a cut down through for the light rail to help with traffic congestion, pedestrians specifically, during events. So is that
Yeah, that's one of them. And I'm not sure to answer your question on what the history was and what wasn't studied or looked at. But I know today during game day events, Tasman is shut down, but certainly an overcrossing like this would be utilized all the time to help bridge that connection from the
Because it
amenities
stops the light
on
rail.
both sides of Tasman.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Those were my two concerns with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, now we have Councilmember Chahal, Watanabe, and O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a comment to make on that. I know we signed a development agreement on this one, and if you look at it, all the costs which we took into consideration were based on the 2018 cost basis, construction cost basis. And I think going forward, we need to add an escalation clause on all our development agreements, because if the project get delayed, it is the city who is footing the bill of the cost escalations. And in this scenario too, we will be more city will be responsible for putting up costs beyond $23 million or something. So it's just a comment going forward. If we sign the development agreement, we should not restrict the cost to a particular year, but they can be restricted to a year, but then we should add an escalation clause, because projects can get delayed or due to one reason or the other, and we don't want to incur cost on the behalf of the city for some of the projects where developer has agreed to pay the cost on those. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I had quite a few questions, but I'm just going to focus on one of them. As I told Director Moback earlier, I was so happy to see all the plans for just making the roads better out on the north side as a result of, working with the related project. And I know a lot of residents are going to be very happy about that. And I know some improvements have already taken place in terms of timing and changing the lights. And that really has made a big improvement in terms of just cars sitting, at the lights. And I look forward to more of that being done out there. But I saw that there's work going to be done improving Mission College Boulevard, and I wondered if Mission College Boulevard, where it runs parallel to the Mercado that's out there, where the AMC Theater is, there is some unsafe ingress egress there that I've had a lot of residents complain about, and traffic's always backing up. I was wondering if that was taken into consideration in terms of improving that in and out there as a result of, obviously the increased traffic that's going to be occurring even in that area as well.
I'm going to have Mike Liu, Assistant Director of Public Works, come up to answer that question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mike Liu, Assistant Director of Public Works. I don't believe that specific request or the issue you brought up related to Mission College is included in this particular scope, but our staff would be more than happy to review and look into that issue, because it appears that that's an existing issue that should be looked at regardless of further development.
I agree, and I was thinking that this would be a perfect opportunity to do it, since there's just going to be so much change and there's going to be work done on the Calabasas as well, and maybe that this could that could be incorporated into it somehow.
Right. I think what's important to note is that the MIP, which was approved by council back in September of last year, is very specific improvements. So we went through a pretty rigorous process to get to a package that we felt met the intent of dealing with the impacts that resulted from the Santa Clara, the related Santa Clara development, in terms of dealing with the VTA. Of course, the VTA did approve this plan. So what's before you today is really the funding agreement that allows us to work with related to potentially get some advanced funding. It's really how payments occur, and kind of very detailed items, so that way the MIP can get started immediately.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm very excited to see all the transit projects that are included in the multimodal improvement plan, and also the bicycle pedestrian improvements, because I think that for this project to be successful, we really have to have we have to really beef up the transportation modes other than automobile, because this is going to be such a big project that, we don't want to keep going in that direction. Mr. Jane, before he left, brought up about the issues about climate change and all that. And so we've got to face the realities that we need to start figuring out how to move people around in a different way. And everyone talks about what they see when they travel in Europe or whatever. Well, this is the perfect place to do it. The type of projects that we're looking at for this area are just really meant to have alternative transportation. And I know that the pedestrian bridge, I mean, that's been talked about a long time, because, and also just, if we're really going to have like the light rail and buses and all that be successful, we need to make sure that we're separating pedestrians from those modes. Just last week, while I was in New York talking to people about rail safety, in the space of 14 hours, 2 people were killed. 2 pedestrians were killed by getting hit by light rail trains in San Jose, over primarily by Bascom, and I forget the other location. But it's a very serious problem, and so a lot of the thinking was particularly for the large stadium events, and as City Place, the amount of people that are going to be coming there eventually, and with the convention center, as that gets kind of revitalized and expanded potentially, we've got to have a better way to move people from Great America, the theme park, to the stadium, to the convention center, to City Place. And, so all those improvements are very important, and we really tremendously appreciate the vision also of the related company and working with us on that. And so this is my chance to put in a plug again, and I know that there are some concerns about that for some of those transportation improvements, that we start working sooner, not wait to the second phase, but to get going so that we can make sure that we can be getting the maximum efficiency from Capitol Corridor and ACE, and what other heavy rail may be coming through, and coordinating that with light rail. So it's just kind of an editorial comment on my part.
I expected that, Councilmember O'Neill, so that's great. We have specific, this is a funding agreement, as we talked about, and there's specific projects that are mentioned in here. So I think we need to approve this and get it going. So is there a motion to approve? Somebody make a motion? Councilmember Hardy?
Okay, and I'll second it.
All right, there's a motion, a second. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this issue? Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Gilmore and member city council members. My name is Jose Cabrera. I'm one of the union carpenter members for the past 23 years. Tonight, as we consider designating a large amount of public funds to support the developers in creating this project, I hope that the council will continue to express to the developer how important it is to provide robust labor standards to the men and women of this community who will build this project. We do not want projects in our area that use exploited labor to extract value from our communities, as we rely on you to see that that does not happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. City Manager, did you have anything to say on that, or no?
We can follow up with him separately.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak on this project? All right, so we have your comments are noted. Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second to approve. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item pulled for discussion was pulled by Councilmember Watanabe. It's item 2E, action on amendment number 1 to the agreement with Muni Services LLC for sales and use tax auditing services. Councilmember Watanabe, you pulled this item.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick question. I mean, I was glad to see that staff is looking to conduct a competitive solicitation process, especially since the same auditor has been used for the same 25 years or over the last 25 years. Because I understood that we do make the city looks to switch out, businesses every couple of years to bring in fresh eyes, to look at city's financials. And I was just wondering, are there a lot of auditing firms like Muni Services that would or could bid on this contract once it's put out?
Thank you for your question. Ken Lee, Director of Finance. To answer your question, in the local government sector, there are mainly two firms. And so Muni Services is a very reputable one that's well-known throughout the region. And so the item before you, just because it's an important service that we feel from an audit of sales tax, we're bringing this forward for your consideration. And so when we will look at this as well as other firms, but they are one of the top firms in the region.
So you're expecting them to put in a bid?
I would expect so, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Motion then to, unless,
Motion to approve?
motion to approve, Mayor.
All right, is there a second? Motion second. Any member of the public like to speak on this issue? Please come forward. Okay, motion second. I see no lights from the council members. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, Councilmember Watanabe. Next, we have public hearing general business. The first is action on direction to proceed with placemaking activities for the Mission Branch Library and City Plaza Park. Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Andrew Crabtree, a Director of Community Development. So in 2017, the City Council contracted with Project for Public Spaces to support various placemaking activities here in the City of Santa Clara. They helped us by conducting a series of workshops, giving some talks, other activities with the community to support this concept of placemaking, where we would think about how to take places, locations throughout our community and program activities, make physical improvements, do whatever it might be necessary to make those really desirable destinations within our community, places where people would go and gather and truly support a community life. As sort of the culmination of the activities that we had under that contract with Project for Public Spaces, in October of last year, they held a stakeholder and community workshop following what they called lighter, quicker, cheaper process, where they're really focused on both activities that could be programmed and improvements that could be made in the Mission Branch Library and surrounding City Plaza Park area to make those that space more attractive and useful to the community. I also mentioned that this location was selected based on an earlier workshop that was conducted where really the community members looked citywide at locations throughout the community that were of importance to them, places they felt could be improved upon or were great already. And it was through that process that the Mission Branch Library and City Plaza Park was selected as a location for this workshop. So in March of this year, Project for Public Spaces provided the city with a report that sort of summarized the outcomes of that workshop and made some recommendations in terms of improvements and activities that could be made in the space. That was reviewed by the Parks and Recreation Commission and the library trustees in March and April of this year. And both groups had positive feedback on the report, which is included in your packet, and ultimately sort of recommended that we move forward with it for next steps. So in the report, sort of following in the spirit of lighter, quicker, cheaper, you'll see that there are a number of recommendations that are meant to be relatively easy to implement and not overly expensive. They emphasize activities, improvements that would support the park use, the library use, and sort of connect those two spaces together. They organized into this sort of series of zones of spaces that are shown here in different colors on the map. And they're trying to bring the library and the park together so they're sort of integrated into one kind of destination in the community. The different zones that were identified were the library plaza, the gazebo zone, free play zone, flex lawn, and intersection, as they're described in the report. Here's an example of some of the types of improvements that are described in the report. This is one of those zones, the library plaza, which is right immediately in front of the library. You see a number of different furniture, elements that could be added that would encourage people to use the space, gather in the space. There's different programming activities that are represented in these pictures. There's sort of a rolling cart with activities, different toys, different things that could be used by people in that space to make it more vibrant and active in the community. One of the more substantive recommendations made in the report, and all this, I should emphasize, came out of the workshop. It came out of the input that was provided by community stakeholders who were in attendance at the workshop. And one of those, that wasn't part of my presentation.
That was a commercial break.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe it would have been more exciting. But in any case, one of the improvements that did come out of this was looking at this gazebo that's there now and really thinking about how to make that even more useful to the community. So, the addition of sort of a stairway that would open it up and allow for different types of activities in that space. And you see some of the pictures again, there's concerts, exercise classes, different kinds of things that are described in the report. So I just would mention that we look at these recommendations, we do evaluate them for consistency with the city's general plan. And there are a number of policies in the general plan that support this type of activities in the community. So we're following that overall adopted vision that the city has for its land uses. That we think this is an important opportunity to better utilize an existing investment that the city has made into the library and the park. Those are existing facilities. And if we can use those even more and make them more meaningful to the community, we'll gain a better return on that investment. We definitely know that there's a community interest in placemaking. We've heard throughout these activities that the community would like more destinations, places to go. And so with that, we also recognize that to implement these recommendations requires an investment of city resources, whether that be for the design, construction, or for staffing, equipment, materials for programming those activities. So if the City Council tonight accepts this report, we will come back in the future for budget-related actions to implement those improvements. So staff is recommending that you accept the recommendations in the report and direct us to work with PBS to finalize the report. With that, staff's available for any questions you might have.
I have some, but I'm going to start with Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. So one of my questions was, I included in the agenda report was, PDFs of the Parks and Rec Commission report from March and the Board of Library Trustees report from April, but it doesn't really say what the comments or the input from Parks and Rec or the Board of Library Trustees, if they had anything. It just, it looks like it was like whatever was in Granicus. I mean, do we know what kind of specific comments perhaps those two bodies made? I think a number of us were at that workshop and, looked through the report, but I wasn't sure, what were their comments?
So the report back that I heard from the staff at those meetings was that the two bodies went through the report, just sort of reviewed what was in there, and they expressed support. They said these sound like good ideas. In particular, the Parks and Rec Commission, recognized that they have sort of a more formal role. Did recommend approval of the design for the gazebo and some of the programming activities that were mentioned in the report. So that was the feedback that we received from those groups, that they were positive. That there wasn't anything that I heard that they had objections to.
And so then one of the next steps would have to be, we would have to find a source to fund whatever improvements we would want to make.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all for now.
So the question I had, Andrew, is So we met back in March. I can hardly remember, it's been so long. Was it March?
Well, we
of
had the
this
workshops
year?
were in October of last year. The report came in March.
When did we meet at Mission Library?
That was October of last year, so it's
A
been
year ago.
a year ago, yes.
And that's been a long time. So my question is that I assume we're going to put some numbers to this recommendation for these how do we go forward? And I don't want to come, in October 2020 and start talking about this again. So how do we get this going? How do we get this project going?
Right. So if council accepts the report tonight, it really then moves into, it's a combination of the library and the Parks and Recs departments that will look at how they might go about implementing those recommendations. So I think with council's action direction tonight, then the intent is to come forward through the next budget cycle with that. And I would also mention that some of the things that were brought up in the report, the library has already implemented. They went ahead and started providing some of those activities and supporting some of them through the resources they already have. But there's also recognition that there should be some additional budgetary actions to really fully implement the recommendations.
I think so,
The big
too.
dollar item is the gazebo, and that we will have to do an estimated amount and put an item forward in the budget for the council to consider.
Well, and we should, because in order to really activate that park and that library there, and to get people to even know that it's there and to use it, because it's such a beautiful setting, we need to start investing in it. So I just, when you said it's going to go back to parks and Parks and Recreation and library, like, who's going to take responsibility for moving this forward? I guess I'll ask city manager so that we can move it forward.
What we can do is items that can be absorbed within the budget, we will look at those items, and as the director already stated, we will also itemize for the council, perhaps through an information memo or through a blog response, what has already happened out there and what's taking place, so that there's greater awareness that we can push out to the community about placemaking events or activities or things that are already available. And then we'll work through the budget process to scope out the cost for the gazebo improvements and bring that back as part of the budget cycle.
Great, because it's so underutilized now, and it's just wasted opportunity the longer we stand. So I'd like to see it so it gets into this upcoming budget so that we can get it funded. Vice Mayor Mahan, Councilmember Chahal, and then Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. I thought this was a very good report, and my concern is more with the physical aspects of the report and the conditions that are existing there, because it's gotten pretty poor. I mean, the grass is dying in places, and I mean, it's just not a vibrant place, even though the library itself is quite vibrant and it's beautiful. The renovations are wonderful, and the children's area has always been well utilized. And the meeting room is great. We had a meeting there on Monday. But the outside is the part that I agree with the mayor. I think that should just, be implemented through the budget as soon as possible to get those physical improvements in place. The programs certainly, get the library board of trustees to weigh in, Parks and Rec and so forth. But the actual physical improvements to make that space attractive and usable to people is what I think we really should focus on getting done just as soon as possible, because I hate to see it in the condition that it's in now, and I think the plans and the ideas that are in this report will make it a very vibrant center for the old quad and attract, children and adults. So I'm anxious to see it get going.
Thank you, Councilmember Chahal, and then Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor. I also say that this is a very good initiative, and all the placemaking seminars, and those are very, very informative, and keeping in view lighter, quicker, and cheaper. I think we should be moving forward with this. And I would add to that, not only this, our other two libraries are also close to the park. So once we complete this thing, we should look forward what we can do to our central library as well as the north side library, because they are also next to the park, and I think we have a lot of scope we can build with the same LQC principles. We can add lot of value to those things, and that will really help the community and add a lot of vibrancy into it. Thank you.
Councilmember Hardy? Thank you. I was just thinking when you talked about events, years ago, we had an ice cream social out there that was very well attended. And having events make a difference. Also, our city historian, Lori Garcia, told a great story about that area. The reason it's a circle is it was a corral. And there's a great story that goes with how it played into the Battle of Santa Clara. And the horses and it gets quite involved. Yes. And so I think bringing that into that idea, and once we have something renovated, having some kind of a big event and making a big deal about that, and the history of why it is where it is.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other council comments. If we want to open it up to the public, I see we have library commissioners here. Yes, no pressure. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Jan Hintermeister. I'm on the Board of Library Trustees, but I'm here speaking on my own behalf. I know that when I saw the presentation and said we're going to move this report forward to a future budget process, I thought, oh my word. So I really agree with the tenor of the comments of the mayor, city manager, and multiple council members that we really need to get this thing moving. And maybe part of what we need to be looking at is our own process, to make our own processes quicker, lighter, and cheaper. To just get things moving. Because, you know, it's a year ago since this most recent playmaking activity out of Mission, but there was a meeting at least 2 years ago, and then we were all at the at University of Santa Clara. That's got to be like 3 years ago or more. So we have to work ourselves on the quicker, lighter part, definitely. And if it takes, discretionary funds or management reserve or however the city has mechanisms for smaller projects, I think we should look at those mechanisms outside of the regular budget process as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Evans. I'm the Vice President of the Old Quad Residents Association. I'd like to say that as residents of the area, we're certainly looking forward to having more events at the Mission Library. Some of the suggestions in the placemaking handbook sound great, and we'd love to see those events happen. I do want to echo some of the sentiment that this process has been very slow. There was the event a whole year ago, and that was the next event that we hear about for something going on. So we'd like to see stuff happening actually quicker, like the playbook calls out. I do also want to mention that putting on events, we have, as the Old Quad, helped sponsor some events for placemaking in the area. We had a spring picnic in the spring. And we also sponsor a board game night and a knitting guild at the library once a month. In fact, board game night's tomorrow, so I'm going to plug it. Please come down and play board games.
What is tomorrow?
We have a board game night at the library, Mission Library, so stop on by. But I do want to echo that in putting together things like the spring picnic, it's been very difficult. There's a lot of work. We certainly credit the library personnel for doing that, but there's a lot of permitting process and red tape that can get in the way of holding events, and we'd like to see that streamlined as well. I know we wanted to have food trucks at the last event, but couldn't due to requirements related to having to fingerprint food trucks to even show up at an event. Those type of restrictions may make it hard for people to come in and really put on the events that we want to see. So in addition to just sponsoring, having more events, we'd like to make it easier for people to hold those events. I'd like to see that as part of the process. Yeah, but otherwise we look forward to seeing this really pick up, and hopefully we'll see funding at some point soon. Thank
Because
you.
all our events need food too. That's an important element of all these events. That's right. Ice cream, food trucks here. Yes, please come forward.
Hi, Patricia Long, member of HLC and the Oak Quad Residents Association. Jonathan just took on my talking points, so that's great.
Do you know that guy? Do you know him?
Yeah,
Yes, okay, good.
I'm really happy to see this item come up, and since because it is in the heart of Oak Quad, and he was talking about the spring picnic that we hosted this year, we're happy to do it like over and over again. I know, Councilmember Chow was there, and that was amazing. It was a lot of fun, and it was the whole place was packed. And there's just so much potential for activation, and we would love to see more of that. You know, the events that we're hosting, we're willing to put in the sweat equity to it. We're ready to go. We have ideas to just like do things over there. I'm actually a little bit disappointed about the room rental fees, like get pushed out of phase 3, because that was one of the things that we wanted to discuss, because that is actually hindering some of the ideas that we have, that we want to actually, you know, use the facilities to activate the area with like a club, with the association events that's open to the public. So that's something that, you know, to consider. And then also in addition to Park and Rec and the library trustees, I would love to see what the Cultural Commission has ideas for, like for the area. Because I know there are concerts that are done at the Triton. Every year, there are a few of them, and like I would love to see some of that come to downtown. So that would be fun. That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please come forward. Speaking of Cultural Commission, here we go. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Deborah Von Hewen from the Cultural Commission, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the Cultural Commission tonight. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I was very excited to see this proposal on the agenda tonight. I know it's something that I myself have been championing for quite a long time. I'm a big advocate of the Project for Public Spaces and for temporary art, which I see is one of the recommendations for the Mission Branch Library. And I understand that there are constraints in both the budget and in city staff to implement a lot of the things that this vision would require, not just in one place, but citywide. I know that last March, we requested that there be a specific plan for the Cultural Commission, because we do have a draft proposal for a specific plan for the overall city. I don't know if that has been considered yet in the city staff or by city manager. And also, we've been talking for several years about getting the 1% for the arts on the books. And that still has not been, as far as I understand, has not been implemented. So I'd just like to suggest that we are able to move forward with staff and with funding if we can coordinate across all of the city departments. So thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for your comments. And that is a perfect place for temporary art as well. Anyone else? All right. So council, Councilmember Watanabe.
Jonathan brought up an interesting point about the food trucks and about the fact that they had to be fingerprinted. Because there's so many food trucks that come into Santa Clara, do they have to be fingerprinted every time they come to Santa Clara? Or were you using different food trucks that we've never used before? Or I was just surprised when you said that. Because I know they draw a
My
crowd.
understanding was a requirement because we were co-sponsored by the library, and any city event requires fingerprinting of all vendors.
I see. Okay.
And it's not clear you could have food trucks without that.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't understand that. I understand volunteers have to be fingerprinted, but people selling things in a food truck have to be fingerprinted for selling. I don't know, city manager, I've never heard of that.
Well, we can look
Yeah,
into
could we
what
look
happened
into
under
that
that
just
scenario
because?
and provide information.
Thank you. It would be good for us to know that. Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I had the same question. Like when we have a food trucks on our streets and they're on public places doing the business, how come it's being restricted to be on another public place when we are trying to do that? It doesn't make sense, and it's like both of them are at a public place and we are allowing other food trucks to be on our public street and they do business every day. So how come we are restricting them over there?
We'll get some information about how food trucks are permitted and provide the response.
Might have been a city-sponsored thing.
That's what we're thinking.
Event, probably. That probably makes a difference. As opposed to a food truck on just a street. Vice Mayor Mahan?
I would like to make the motion to accept the recommendation in the Mission Branch Library City Plaza Park placemaking pilot project analysis and recommendations draft report, and direct staff to work with PPS to finalize the report.
Second.
Expeditiously.
Expeditiously,
Thank you.
definitely.
Yes, all right. Motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none? Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you to all the attendees that testified, and to our library commissioners and city librarian and mission city librarian, mission librarian. Thank you, Justin. All right, we're going to move back on the agenda to back to our second special order of business, because I see the group has arrived here. We're going to talk about Proclamation of World Polio Day. So as a special order of business this evening, I would like to draw the community's attention to the ongoing efforts for the eradication of polio, and particularly the significant role played by the Rotary Club in this notable cause by proclaiming October 24th, 2019 as World Polio Day. Polio is a crippling and potentially deadly disease caused by the polio virus, which mainly affects children under the age of 5. There is no cure for polio. It can only be prevented by immunization. Since 1988, cases due to wild polio virus have decreased by over 99% from an estimated 350,000 cases then to 33 reported cases in 2018. In 1988, Rotary International helped establish the Global Eradication Initiative to immunize the children of the world against polio. And to date, Rotary has contributed more than $1.9 billion and countless hours to this cause. So at this time, I would like to invite the Rotary Club of Santa Clara's Polio Chair, Luann Alexander, and Club President Colleen Knoll to the podium. They'd like to say a few words. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mayor Gilmore and City Council. We greatly appreciate this. So I'm Luann Alexander, and this is Colleen Knoll. She's our current president. I'm past president, and as you said, chair of the Eradicate Polio Committee. And we're so excited that you're joining us in making this proclamation for this week for World Polio Day. And this is such a project that is very dear to our hearts. 3 decades ago, 1,000 children every day were killed or paralyzed by polio. And my mother herself actually as a child had polio, and she was one of the lucky ones, fairly recovered, and then later on in life developed post-polio syndrome and ended up in a wheelchair. And that's how she spent the end of her life, is in a wheelchair. So it doesn't just affect, it affects children, but then it will come back many times with the post-polio syndrome. So to be able to have this initiative where we can eradicate this disease is just absolutely incredible. And that's what we are dedicated to do. This project has been so much more difficult than ever anticipated. It's cost so much more money, so much more time. People have lost lives. Workers giving immunizations have been killed in the process because there's been political issues where so much confusion. And that's where Rotary comes in as a non-political organization. We're able to get in there and make a difference in the communities right there with Rotarians helping out. So it means very much to us that you are recognizing this and supporting us in that. So thank you so much.
So thank you. So on behalf of the City Council, we're proclaiming October 24th in 2019 at World Polio Day, and we want to encourage all citizens to join the Rotary Club of Santa Clara and Rotary International in a fight for a polio-free world. So if you join us up here, we'd like to present
Absolutely.
you with this proclamation.
Thank you.
Do one of this. I really appreciate it. And then we'll
All right, heading back to the agenda, our next item is item number 4, which is action on a resolution approving an affordable housing agreement with Zane Partners LLC for the project located at 2310 Calle de Mundo.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Yes.
Jonathan Veach, Housing Manager. And tonight I'll be providing an overview on the proposed affordable housing agreement for the project located at 2310 Calle de Mundo. So to summarize, this project is part of the Tasmany Specific Plan, which was approved in November 2018. As per the specific plan, 10% of all of the units must be affordable to households making an average of 100% AMI. The developer has 3 separate projects within the Tasmany Specific Plan, and applying the 10% requirement to these projects and accounting for the density bonuses in the specific plan, their obligation would be 80 affordable units restricted at 100% AMI. Tonight, staff is recommending a proposal to consolidate the requirement to provide 80 moderate income units and instead receive 30 very low income units at 50% AMI. So typically, the form of our affordable housing agreement is approved on the consent calendar. However, this is a unique proposal because we're considering receiving less units at deeper affordability levels. This item was initially considered on the consent calendar on September 24th, 2019. However, City Council continued the item and asked staff to provide additional information on the following topics: details on the economic analysis or economic benefit for the city, how the proposal would align with the city's affordable housing goals and with its regional housing needs allocation targets, how the proposal would align with the context of the Tasmany Specific Plan, and any policy implications or precedent that would be established by the proposal. So this map highlights the 3 mixed-use projects within the Tasmany Specific Plan that would include a total of 969 housing units. The developer is proposing to enter into a single affordable housing agreement to meet its inclusionary housing requirements for all of the projects. The first project at the bottom of the screen includes 503 residential units across 2 phases, and those are parcels 19 and 29. This project received ARC approval, or Architectural Review Committee approval, in July of this year. The second proposed project is parcel 24 in the middle of the screen. This project would include 150 units, and this is the affordable housing project that we're proposing. On the screen, it's a little hard to see. It's referenced as an 80-20. That's because 80% of the units would be market rate and 20% would be affordable, or 30 units would be affordable. And affordable deals are sometimes structured this way because a minimum of 20% need to be affordable at 50% AMI to qualify for tax credits and bond financing. So that's kind of why that model makes sense. And then the third project proposed at the top of the screen, parcels 61 and 60, would include 316 residential units, and those plans are still under city review. I should say for the affordable project at parcel 24, they did go through the project clearance committee with the city, but architectural review is pending in November. There was a couple dates in the staff report, one said October, one said November. It could potentially be pushed to December, but it's still kind of in process. So when we look at the economic benefit for the city, we start with the assumed market rent. We studied a variety of comps to get an assumed market rent, namely the Santa Clara Square project, where units are renting at approximately $4.35 per square foot. We know that might be a high assumption, but we wanted to use the highest possible number to make sure that kind of passed the test that the city's getting a good deal. We used the per square foot assumption multiplied by the average unit size, which is 690 square feet, and that comes out to an estimated market rent of $3,000. So in scenario 1, we're looking at the value of 80 units at 100% AMI, and those affordable units would rent at $2,627. So these rents are set by the State Department of Housing and Community Development on an annual basis, and they're fixed. So that's the rent for a 1-bedroom until next year. So we look at the difference between what we're assuming is market and the affordable rent. The difference is $373 a month. We multiply that times 12 to get the annual difference, multiply it across the 80 units, and then we do kind of a net present value study. We look at that through 55 years because that's the length of the restrictions for the covenants, and we discount it to a present value number. So $6.7 million. I also just want to highlight that the lower the assumed market rent, right, because that's an assumption and it can change, but the lower the assumed market rent, the more value goes to the scenario with less units and more affordability. And so I'm trying to highlight that kind of in the second column. But if you assume that a one-bedroom at Tasman East rents for $2,627, so that, just for reference, would come out to $3.80 a square foot, which isn't totally unreasonable. But if the market came down and the units rented at $26.27, there's effectively no value in the 100% AMI units because you're rent restricting market rate units. And so there's really no implied value. There is rent restrictions over time, so maybe in terms of the escalations, there would be value, but not kind of at the current rent. So scenario 2 looks at the 30 units at 50% AMI. And what stands out is the 50% affordable rent. It's $1,463. That's significantly lower than the 100% AMI rents, over $1,200 less. So applying kind of the same rationale and looking at the difference multiplied by 12 times the 30 units in the project, you get $10.3 million of a net present value. And so even though we're getting less units, the rents are set so much lower that there's actually more economic value to the city. So again, in scenario 2, I took the market rate down to $26.27 to see what happens. And although the economic benefit is decreased, it's still significant enough compared to scenario 1. So scenario 1 had a 0 value. Here you can see that when the market rate goes lower, this scenario looks a lot better than scenario 1. On the flip side, if you increase your market rate assumption, some of the value shifts back to the first scenario. And that actually you can figure out what the break-even point is, and it's about $3,350. So at that market rate, or $4.80 a square foot, you would kind of have a break-even between two scenarios. So again, the important point I want to highlight is that the affordable rents are fixed. They don't change by unit size, right? They're set by the bedroom type and the unit count and not the unit count, but the bedroom type. So the rents are set for a studio, a one-bedroom, and a two-bedroom. So when you look at a one-bedroom, it doesn't matter if it's 500 square feet or 1,000 square feet, you get the same affordable rent. And so from an economic perspective, this type of proposal would always make the best sense where the unit sizes are smaller because we're able to capture more value. So those were some of the details on the economic benefit. I also wanted to discuss how the proposal aligns with our affordable housing pipeline. So our current pipeline, kind of the bottom right corner, includes an estimated 1,800 units, which is a very significant number. Just for reference, our city's existing housing portfolio has 1,300 affordable units. So our current portfolio would exceed the entire affordable housing stock that's in the city at 1,300 units. It's been difficult to actually build an affordable housing pipeline since the dissolution of RDA. So what we've done, we've been able to leverage some of our valuable city land parcels. We've been careful to negotiate use of subsidy, which are our housing successor funds. We've successfully been able to partner with the county to use Measure A funds. And ultimately, our inclusionary housing policy will be a critical tool to really expand the pipeline in the future. As you can see from the table, we have a pretty nice mix of affordability across the spectrum. However, because of inclusionary housing, where we get the units at 100% AMI, the pipeline is distorted towards the higher end of the income spectrum. So the majority of our units will come at moderate income, and kind of it's more difficult to create units on the lower end of the spectrum. We do anticipate full build out of the 4,500 units at Tasman East. And so we conservatively estimate that that would generate 400 moderate income units. And this would be the first AHA approved as part of the Tasman East specific plan. Similarly, when we look at our RHNA or our regional housing needs allocation targets, you can see that our moderate income allocation is 755 units compared to our low and very low allocations, which are more than 1,700 units. So really, we need to create a lot more low and very low than we do moderate. When you look at that compared to the housing pipeline, which is kind of the column in green, we expect to have an excess of moderate income units, and we expect to have a deficit in low and very low. Especially our very low income units, we would need 700 compared to our current pipeline. So this current proposal it would address about 5% of that need, but it helps the city address its biggest deficit, which is for very low-income units. So kind of before I conclude, I just want to touch on the policy implications or precedent that would be established based on this proposal. So as it relates to Tasman East, there still remains a very big need for very low-income units, and staff would continue to explore proposals to consolidate moderate housing obligations for very low or low-income units, provided kind of two factors. One, that the proposal represents an equal or greater amount of value of subsidy back to the city, and two, as long as the proposal continues to help the city achieve its RHNA targets. Ultimately, for any proposal to make sense, kind of we talked about this through the economic benefit analysis, but the developer would likely have to own multiple parcels in close proximity and predominantly build out small units, and they would have to have similar or comparable amenity packages across all the projects. So it isn't necessarily easy to kind of meet all of those, but this proposal does. And then I think in future specific plans, there's an opportunity to negotiate deeper levels of affordability or maybe higher set-asides or a mix of both, and try to address some of these issues in actually the design of the specific plans as we move forward. As it relates to Tasman East, staff doesn't expect that we're going to run out of our deficit of very low-income units anytime soon, so we would entertain similar proposals as long as it made sense for the city economically and it's helping us meet our RHNA targets. Ultimately, any of these proposals must come before City Council and are subject to discretionary approval on a case-by-case basis. And so we can talk through all of those factors each time they're proposed, I guess. Going too quickly. So in conclusion, we think the proposal accomplishes the following. It provides an estimated $3.6 million economic benefit to the city, helps the city diversify its housing pipeline and create units at deeper levels of affordability. It helps the city address its potential excess of moderate income units and deficit of very low income units relative to our RHNA requirements, does not negatively impact the build out of Tasman East, and we think it provides a pathway to create very low income units if necessary in the future. So with that, our recommendation is to adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the affordable housing agreement for the provision of 30 very low income units at 2310 Calle del Mundo. That concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm the one that pulled this item a couple weeks ago, and I think that you have pretty much answered mostly all my questions on this. So thank you for laying it out the way you did and presenting it the way you did. I was concerned that we do this now, that there are going to be other developers and other requests for this to be done, and I wanted to know how it was going to impact the rest of the city or Tasman East or what was happening in that area. So I think that it would be good public policy for us to do this, because we are then, it makes sense for us to start chipping away at our requirements for the low and very low income. But I also want to be cognizant of the fact that once we do this, that other developers are going to look at the precedent that we're setting for this. And they're, especially in Tasman East. And of course, we're going to have to take each project individually, but also look at fairness for other projects, you know, in that specific plan and maybe other specific plans as well. So there may come a time where we, hopefully we will fulfill all our requirements for the low and very low, and then we, you know, we'll shift as the market dictates for us. So I'm okay with approving this. And one of my questions was, if other developers, especially in Tasman East, want this, they will have to come back to us as well for the same type of proposal. But I think it would be good public policy to approve this resolution and adopt these this plan for the low and very low income units, and make sure that, you know, when others come, that we are setting a precedent by doing this. But everything will be judged on each individual project. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. So a topic that I'm very interested in. So Jonathan, like, because you kind of talked about amenity packages. So I think there's a concern particularly when we're kind of taking these units from several different buildings and putting them into one, and this has come up elsewhere, that the units are going to be very similar or won't be, kind of demarcated or whatever as the very low income units, and that they will be of a similar quality as the other units. Is that part of the agreement with the developer?
Yeah, it is. And what's nice about an 80/20 is that 80% of the units are market. So they really need to have the amenities that they would market to anywhere. And so the requirement is that the 20% that's set aside, number one, they can't be concentrated in a certain area of the building. They have to be distributed evenly. And so we have approval over where the units end up being located. So they won't all be on the first floor or anything like that. And they all have access to the same amenity packages. You would never have a market rate tenant that can access a certain amenity that's somebody that's low income can't access. So that's not the issue. And when we look at the projects as a whole, we do compare amenity packages across other projects. We're most concerned about unit size. So for example, we wouldn't want the developer to have all the one bedrooms at 1,000 square feet, and then in this project, they're 500. But we averaged them out, and they were all about 690 to 700 square feet. So we look mostly unit sizes and then kind of more specifically within the building. But because it's an 80/20, these will be the same as market rate units.
Okay. So the 690 seems to be where a lot of one-bedroom apartments are falling out these days, or?
I wouldn't say across the whole pipeline, but in this specific project, the developer's model is to build smaller units and try to reach kind of more naturally affordable price points.
Okay, great. So the other questions, and I didn't mean to look like an ignoramus, but I'm willing to admit when I am. When you came up with the numbers for the 150% AMI and compared to what the market rent, now what formula, whatever, do you use to decide if this is what you think market rate is based on the square foot, the price per square footage and this, what it is you come up with estimated rent? So what factors do you do to discount, like for the AMI and the very low,
Yeah, so ultimately the market rate units will be determined by market. You don't really know what that will be. You kind of do your best to estimate. And because the rent will change based on the unit size, right? Larger units will rent for usually higher amounts versus smaller units. We tend to use the assumed per square foot. So you can go on the Santa Clara Square website. That's a pretty high-end residential project, not too far away in terms of proximity. And you can look at what they're renting for versus the unit sizes. Much bigger unit sizes, and you can kind of just divide the rent by the unit size, and it comes up to about $4.35 on average. So we took that number and just multiplied it by the average square foot of the units in this project. It's kind of how we came up with the 3,000. The affordable rents are set, so we can pull those from the state website. What is the 100%? What is the 50% AMI unit?
The Community Development and Housing Department in Sacramento is establishing those numbers?
They do, yeah. And so we publish those on our website. Developers can access them, or community residents, and they're updated on an annual basis.
And I assume that they're differentiated by all the different geographies, and what a
by county.
rent
So we get
in Reading compared to Santa Clara or something.
By county, but it does make a difference. I mean, there's times where you're looking at the same affordable rents in Santa Clara as perhaps Gilroy, and there are some disparities there that developers can take advantage of. But it's easier perhaps to build affordable housing in Gilroy because the cost to acquire the land is cheaper, but you're getting the same rents. And there are probably some areas where the affordable rents can be pushing market. These are 100% AMI, but affordable technically goes up to $120. So you can see a one bedroom go up to $3,000, and you'll find areas, even in Santa Clara perhaps, where a market rate one bedroom is $3,000. So at the highest end of the affordability spectrum, it goes up pretty high. So.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mahan. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I would move the staff recommendation to adopt the resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute the affordable housing agreement with Zane Partners LLC, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate, execute, and record any documents necessary to implement the terms of the affordable housing agreement consistent with this report, including any amendments to the affordable housing agreement to implement the terms, covenants, and restrictions associated with the provision of 30 very low income units at 2310 Calle del Mundo, and authorize the recordation thereof.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I see Councilmember Hall, you have your light on.
Thank you, Mayor. Some clarifications I need on those. First is when we did the scenarios, different scenarios, we only took one-bedroom apartments, right? So out of the 900 units, do we have two-bedroom, three-bedroom, or all of them are one-bedroom? Because we have to have affordable component as per the percentage of how many are two-bedroom, how many are three-bedroom, how many are one-bedroom.
Yeah.
Are we meeting that standards like we will have?
We are. It's a really good question. So I did this just for ease of kind of the presentation, but I actually have a slide that summarizes. You can see kind of the different parcels and different units and unit sizes. And at the bottom, there's a percentage of kind of across the whole Tasman East for Ensemble. There's 24% studios, 54% one bedrooms, 18% two bedrooms. And if you actually looked at Parcel 24, the way it's structured, there's 88 studios and 41 bedrooms, 14 two bedrooms. So at Parcel 24, the affordable project, over half the units are studios. But we would require a percentage breakdown that's reflective of the whole, of kind of the whole area. So at the bottom are kind of the numbers we would be getting. 17 one bedrooms, 8 studios, 5 two bedrooms. So still predominantly one bedrooms, even though the project is structured in kind of a different way.
Thank you for that clarification. My next question, can you give me some more idea, like tax credit and bond financing? That's the reason we are going down and less than 50% of AMI. Can you elaborate why we are doing that?
Sure. So there's kind of two overarching requirements to qualify for tax credits or tax-exempt bond financing with affordable housing. One is that you'd have to provide 20% of the units at 50% AMI. That's the current proposal. The other way to kind of trigger tax-exempt credits and bonds would be 40% at 60% AMI, or 100% affordable project that averages out to 60% AMI. And so the developers, in theory, taking an economic loss, right, based on the numbers we presented. But by accessing tax credit equity, they're not necessarily making more money, but they have to invest less equity into the project because they get tax credit equity. So their return on capital looks better when they're able to get tax credit equity.
Oh, okay. So because just to do the math, like 80 units were giving us 55,000 square feet of for your scenarios, right? And 30 units only give us 20,700 square feet. I'm not going to the exact actual units we'll get, but so our square foots are being reduced a lot, like less than half the square feet we are getting on that. And my question was, did we look at some other scenarios where they get the tax credit, and let's say we put 50% at low, at less than 50% AMI, and other 50% at 60%, then they should still be getting their tax credit if we do that. That way we can get a little bit more units versus 30 only?
Yeah, we looked at various scenarios. The reason that really there's the discrepancy, kind of the square footage discrepancy, is that the 50% AMI units are so much lower than the 100% AMI units. So here they're quoted as 1463 versus 2627. So, the 100% AMI versus market is only a $300 difference, pretty close. 50% versus 100% is a $1,200 difference. So there's so much more subsidy kind of implied in the 50%. It's if you change up the breakdown where you're getting a handful of 50% AMI units, you wouldn't hit the 20% at. So we're just hitting the 20% at 50. Once you lower that amount, even if you're providing units at 60, you have to kind of go to the next test, which is 40% at 60. And when you look at 40% of the units, it's 60% that would be 60 units, right? But the rent at 60% AMI is still, it's like $1,600. And so that was kind of a non-starter with the developer because the implied subsidy was so great, it wouldn't really incentivize them to do tax credit financing or anything like that. What we did negotiate was and I think it's in the staff report, is an inclusionary in lieu fee. And when we looked at kind of the requirements on a project-by-project basis, there were fractional units on each of those. And so we took the fractional units and we came up with a figure around $70,000 or $80,000. And so we were able to get that payment as an in lieu fee in addition to the very low-income units.
I know. So in our scenario, what's happening is we are getting 30 units, right? So the rest of the 50 units out of the 80, which we were anticipating as per the approval, they will be going back to the market rate. So the developer will get tax credits as well as the market rate on those 50. So I think we should get a little bit more out of it so that we can get a couple of more units so that it's a win-win situation for both of us.
So the 50 units that we're not getting, every unit we're looking at is related to the market rate unit. It's all relative to the $3,000 rent. The 50 units we're not getting would only provide additional value to the developer if they were renting for something above $3,000. And
even at $3,000, they make $373 per. So they are making basically. I did that calculation. So they will be making around $12 million on those 50 units in due course of time. So additional 12 million versus 80 units. So
yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at it.
Right.
The analysis that I provided is all relative to the $3,000. So it's purely from the perspective of what is the developer losing and what's the implied subsidy. And so the analysis accounts for all of the units in the project in both scenarios. And even though you're getting less units in scenario 2, it's because the value of the units is so much lower that the subsidy is actually greater for the city.
I would look at that situation too, like when actual analysis, when we get 30 units only, the developer is getting 50 units in the market rate, and then comparing that situation, and they get the tax credit. So overall, maybe the developer is making more money overall versus the city putting in more subsidy.
I think it's actually a win-win. I think the city's
making
making
that's
out
what I'm
better,
saying. If
and
it
the
is a
developer
win-win,
is too.
if we can get a couple of more units under more than 30 units, that would be great for the city. That's my question.
Okay.
If we are both making some headway into that, we are gaining something and developer is gaining something. If we can have another 1 or 2 units, that would be great.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any other discussion from the council? Any from the audience? If you'd like to, please come forward. Thank you. Good evening.
My name is Derek Bowen, coming to you today as a member of the public. As a prospective Santa Clara resident, I've been looking around for a while to try to move in down here to Santa Clara. And bigger problem that we have here in California is that housing is a supply and demand issue. We do not have enough houses for the demand of what people want to live here. Coming in here and kind of cutting down the number of houses that we're making is just going to continue to exacerbate the issue. Chairman Raj brought up a really good, Councilmember Raj brought up a very good point, is that we should possibly look into, let's go up to the 60%. For $1,600, $1,700 a month for somebody who's looking for affordable housing is probably much more, we're going to get much more out of it if we get 60 units versus 30 units, I think is what we have listed. So I really just kind of implore you guys to let's see if we can look into some place to be able to expand this housing. Because once we start expanding the housing, these market rate prices are going to start to drop as the demand starts to drive back as we actually get the supply. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Wesker Castro, Policy Associate with Silicon Valley at Home. We would like to commend staff for all their work in bringing this agreement to Council. One thing we'd like to note is that with the inclusionary rate at 100% AMI, it does make it a tad difficult to get those units at deeper levels of affordability. So what we see here is an opportunity to get those deeper levels of affordability. The housing crisis affects folks of all income levels, anywhere from our moderate income level, which is something that we're working on, as well as VLI, ELI, LI as well. So this is a great opportunity, and going forward, we should see this as a commitment to creating more growth and inclusive growth for housing for all throughout the North Santa Clara area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I just want to make it clear that we're not lowering the number of units that we're building in this development. Is that true? It's just we're lowering, we're just changing the levels, changing in to deeper levels of affordability for this particular project. But overall, we're not lowering the number of units that were
That's
approved.
correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And we're on target to maybe surpass the RENA allocation.
Yeah, and we're on target for our affordable housing numbers.
And just our numbers in general,
All of our numbers in general, in terms of the housing production in the city of Santa Clara. So we're doing that. We just have to look at ways at making deeper, those affordability levels, much more affordable for people to live here.
So we are sympathetic to everyone's plight and finding a place.
Thank you very much for those comments. We have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Good luck to the developers, and get those online as soon as you can. Thank you very much for bearing with us and having patience. All right. Next, we have reports of members and special committees. I just wanted to say that Councilmember Watanabe and I attended the League of California Cities Conference. Neither of us are prepared to report on that. We will report next week. The highlight of our report will be the presentation that Gaurav Garg made, our IT specialist there. He was pretty much the rock star of IT at the League of California Cities compared to other cities when he reported on Santa Clara. So stay tuned for next week. We'll report on that. And I think Councilmember Watanabe even has pictures of that. So, yes. So he made Santa Clara proud. I don't have anything else, Vice Mayor Mahan.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to report on the Neighborhood University Relations Committee meeting that was held last night in Mission Library. It was attended by many neighbors and students from Santa Clara University. And we discussed the 3 initiatives that the committee has undertaken to work on with staff, and staff made an excellent presentation under Director Crabtree and his staff on parking, housing, and code enforcement. Santa Clara University is building more on-campus parking and has new programs to make it more convenient for students to park on campus, trying to get cars out of the neighborhood. The university has built more on-campus housing, and starting this year, and it will be a 2-year process to get it all in place, they will be requiring freshmen and sophomores to live on campus. So hopefully that will alleviate some of the burden on the student housing in the area as well. And code enforcement, the police department and the campus safety and our own code enforcement unit here has stepped up code enforcement, giving a greater degree of quiet enjoyment in university neighborhoods. And there is a Neighborhood Appreciation Day for the university area on November 12th, starting at 6 p.m., going on to 8 p.m., sort of a drop-in event with treats and activities. It's to be held at the Off-Campus Living Center at 862 Market Street. And council members Raj Shahal and Karen Hardy were with me at the meeting. I don't know if they have any additional comments, but the university is really stepping up and trying to get more and more activities, held on campus, housing on campus, parking on campus, and trying to really, it's been such an improved relationship this year, over the last couple of years. So we're working hard on those initiatives.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Following on the theme of Santa Clara University, I just wanted to mention that a number of us were able to attend the inauguration of Father Kevin O'Brien as the, I think, 29th president of Santa Clara University, and Mayor Gilmore gave very eloquent remarks of welcome on behalf of the city and spoke about the historic relationship between the university and the city. And I think it was a very special and moving event. Particularly was appreciative of the representatives of the Ohlone who gave a very special blessing and reminded us all that they are the original people of Santa Clara. And then particularly when I think about Ulistack, and I would love to see someday a little cultural, Loney Cultural Center there or something. But it was very, reminded me of how great it is to have an institution of the caliber of Santa Clara University, and they are lucky to be in the city of Santa Clara. So that was great to be there, to be part of that wonderful day.
I forgot, thank you. They reminded me they were here before us, the university. But I do want to say, I want to apologize to Councilmember Hardy. I didn't find out you were there until afterwards. I had my list of the council members that were attending, so I just wanted to say she did attend that, and but I didn't know until afterwards. All right, Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. In addition to what Vice Mayor said about the UNERC committee, I would like to point out a couple of things. All the partners like City, Santa Clara University, PD, the things have really improved from all perspectives. And it was really good to know that Santa Clara University is starting off-campus parking in their north side garage for residents who are living in the vicinity. So that's a good news. And one other thing which Santa Clara University is doing for SCU-owned houses outside, they're banning the tables in the front of their lots. So that's a big thing, and it is a very proactive step. And I think we should be looking at that if we can to avoid the nuisance for those tables, which you all know what I'm trying to tell you. So it is a good initiative that SU is taking very proactive steps on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other council members, so we'll move on to City Manager Executive Director Report.
I have good news. The Public Records online portal made its debut yesterday on the city's website. The portal gives a public insight into the number of public records requests that the city receives on a monthly basis, as well as it provides greater transparency to the community in terms of the number of requests, as well as the produced responses. I'd also like to recognize staff who worked tirelessly over the last couple of months to concurrently respond to public records requests while also implementing this technology. And just everyone in the departments has been great, and particularly people sitting right in front of you, Simrat, Nora, and Nadine have made big pushes on trying to get records requests out and getting this online. Also, more good news, tomorrow, the public beta testing will begin for the city's new website. It will start and trigger the process of collecting input, and if you will, a test drive about the city's new website. We'll be collecting the input and making changes to the website as we receive input and determine that those changes are warranted, such that by the end of the year, we'll be launching the final proposed website. We'll be in front of the council on November 12th to provide a more in-depth presentation, but I did want to announce that it will be launched tomorrow. Also want to share with you that we will kick off the year being featured by Business View magazine. It's a magazine that has 840,000 subscribers throughout the North American continent. It's a multi-platform digital media source. Its focus is on public sector, reporting out on latest advancements in municipal public works, green initiatives, and sustainability programs. I had the opportunity to interview with the editor-in-chief last week and share some of Santa Clara's stories, and within 2 days, we were selected to kick off the January 2020 year to be features, which means we'll have about 6 to 10 pages where we have the opportunity to highlight all that's going on. And we were selected because of our best practices of cities and city management. So stay tuned for that. And last, I want to also acknowledge staff that's provided an incredible amount of support, in some cases even emergency support for Comic-Con. The city had the opportunity through the Central Park Library to welcome 8,000 attendees, and I'm told that 6,000 arts and crafts projects were made, and people walked away with those arts and crafts projects, which really shows the level of success, both and as well as the engagement from attendees. But just wanted to call out our staff for supporting such a large event. And what I was in bed with the flu, but I was hearing from Hillary and Cynthia just how great it was going. So thank you, staff, and thank you, City of Santa Clara, for a great event. That's it.
Thank you. I know Councilmember Watanabe and I were there. I don't know if anybody else on the council attended Comic-Con. Did you go, Raj?
I was there.
So it was really a great event. Yeah, kudos to thank you for bringing that up to our library staff. Okay, so that leads us to our adjournment. I don't think we have any adjournments tonight. So is there a motion to adjourn? Motion second to adjourn. Please register your vote. Has everyone registered their vote? Unless you want to stay here longer. And that passes unanimously, and the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.